Bolo! So as you guys can see, I have a ton of gear right here, and I probably have a little bit of the gear acquisition syndrome, better known as gas. And I buy a lot of keyboards, I buy a lot of drum machines, I buy a lot of stuff like that because I'm used to using that type of equipment, because I came up in the early 2000s making beats, and back then we had drum machines and keyboards and stuff. And we had Reason and Cakewalk and Cubase and Logic when it was on PC. And we had a lot of gear. And back in the day when you used to walk into a studio and you had like 3 or 4 keyboards, like an MPC and stuff like that, everybody was like, yo, he's gonna create some fire today. But now things have changed. And even back then, I even kind of changed from it, because even though I had a lot of gear, I even switched to making beats on laptops back then. And people used to look at me like I was crazy when I used to walk into a studio with just a laptop and a MIDI controller and a little cheap, sound card. But basically things have changed a lot, because now a lot of producers are just using laptops, MIDI controllers, and they're not even using sound cards. They're just using the sound card inside the computer and just plugging straight on up. And I think it's very cool. I think people have kind of figured out that you don't need all of this. Even though to me, it is very fun to use this. And to me, I feel like you get a better sound out of this. But you have to go through a few things to get what you really want in using a DAWless setup like this. For all of you younger guys who are just now getting started and you want to start making beats, me being totally honest, I don't think that you should go out and be looking for any keyboards and nothing like that. I think you guys should start off on a laptop, and I think you guys should probably get something maybe like FL Studio or Reason, or if you got like a Mac, it already comes with GarageBand. You can get Logic, you can get Studio One, you can get Ableton too. But you can get a lot of stuff that can really enhance your productions very quickly without getting all of this. I think this is probably the next step you should take. Or if you're older like me and you've used this type of stuff back in the day, like an MPC 2000 XL, or you use like an ASR 10, or if you use like any type of old drum machines, or if you use like old keyboards like the Motif, or like the old Phantom, like the old Phantom S, or stuff like that, then this will probably be your speed right here, because you're used to using that type of hardware. For all of you younger guys out there, just go ahead and get you a laptop and get you a decent MIDI controller. But I would recommend getting you a very good audio interface, such as something comparable to like what I have down here is a Universal Audio X4 audio interface that is very dope, and you can get it right now through zZounds.com, just like with all the other gear. You like how I slid that in there? You can go ahead and click that link in the description if you want to get some gear, and they don't do no credit or background checks on a whole bunch of items, like stuff that I'm talking about in this video right here. Yeah, so click that link down there. But yeah, you really don't need that much at all. Like right now, I make my beats pretty much about 60-40 right now. 60% on the hardware, 40% using software and a MIDI controller. And to be honest with you, it is way easier to make it with just the software and a MIDI controller. However, that hardware sound that I like, I can only get it from using these back here. And especially now that I got this Jupiter X right here, this thing right here is a beast. Once I figure this thing out, I'm gonna do a nice little video on it real soon. But this thing right here is a beast. A beast. And that's why I like working on hardware, because it gives me that hardware sound. I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain. It's kind of like just hearing something going through those cables and being routed into converters and all that stuff. It just gives me that sound that I've always been kind of wanting when I create inside of the box. Even though that a lot of these programs have some great sounds, like you have the Arteria sounds, you have the Native Instrument sounds. Like those are like my favorites right now. You have the Korg sounds in here. You have tons of different sounds you can use in Contact. You just have a bunch of stuff that you can use. And even though they are sounding really good, just to me, they do not sound like the hardware back here. Like I love running my stuff through the MPC Key 61, like especially my drums. Like when I get my drum kits and I load those things up, they just sound really good coming out of MPC Key 61 rather than me using them inside of a program. When I use them in a program, it seems like they lose like a little bit of quality. I love just running everything out and just importing everything as audio into these programs and then mix that way. And if I have to add some things, I can kind of use like a hybrid setup that way. Don't get me wrong, it still sounds good. Like I love using my drums inside of FL Studio because it seems like they just make those really fat drums. I don't know what they do. And of course, the MPC software sounds really good with drums. Like really good. It almost sounds just as good as using the hardware. But just so far as using all the other sounds, they sound really good. You can find an infinite amount of sounds on there, but it just doesn't sound like how I want it to sound coming out of the hardware. And then now that I have the Tascam Model 12 over here, running that stuff through, and I can add some compression, add some EQ to it before I even hit the converters inside of the Apollo. I just love doing it that way. Now, even though I still love doing it that way, I still find myself just opening up Logic or Studio One or FL, and I just love just going in and just making beats. The only thing about it is I have to do a little bit more to kind of get it sounding the way I want it to sound. Now, music is very subjective, but it's a certain way that I want my stuff to sound. And if it doesn't sound like that, I just feel like it's just not finished to me. I just, I'm just used to hearing this hardware sound. So when I get certain sounds inside of here, even though they have like clones of the hardware, it sounds good, but it doesn't sound like that hardware grit to it. But it's easier to make, it's faster to make, and I can pump out so many beats in a short amount of time because I have templates in all of my programs. I pretty much have some hi-hats, some claps, a kick, a bass, everything pretty much ready to go. And either I can take some loops and import them in, or I can make my own melodies and import everything in, and I'm pretty much done. Then from there, just kind of mix it, turn the levels up, and export it, and I'm done. Unlike with the hardware, you got to make the beat, and then once you get done, make sure it sounds pretty good, and then what you got to do is you got to route everything through, then put that into the DAW, then kind of level things up from there, maybe do a little bit of mixing, then you can go ahead and export everything out. It's a whole process, but I actually made the process a lot easier because I have a certain way of how I do these things to where it doesn't take that much time, but it takes time. That's the only thing about using hardware. It's going to take time, but it just sounds really good. To me, it just sounds good. Maybe to you it doesn't, but to me it just sounds good. But for all you guys who are just now starting out and you've been making beats on the laptop and just using your MIDI controller, you could just stick to that. Because another thing about hardware is, you got to really kind of learn how to play. You got to know some music theory, and there's not too many, shortcuts when it comes to using hardware. Unlike with a computer, you can go ahead and type in the notes and do that. You can do that on the MPC and stuff like that, but it's a little more harder. But with the computer, you can actually go in, type in the notes, make your own chords. They have chord builders in there. You can go ahead and do all your effects. You can have time. You can add portal, you can do all that stuff in real time on there rather than you having to make the beat on here first and then having to put all that stuff in there later on. It does have some effects like in the MPC and all that stuff we can add on there. Like they have like halftime and they have a few other effects that a lot of people use inside a laptop, but it is absolutely much easier to do all of those effects and get everything sounding the way you need to sound. But you guys let me know. You let me know if you're the type that likes to do everything inside of the box, or if you're the type that, likes to do everything using hardware. So, hope this video was informative. Hope you guys learned something from it. And like I always say, peace out.